When I was 10 years old, my grandfather died, and nobody told me. I think that 10 years old is old enough to, number one, know that grandpa died, and number two, to say, yes, I want to go to the funeral, or no, I don't want to go to the funeral. But that my opinion should have been sought in this matter. My older brother, he was 12. He knew, and he got to go to the funeral. My younger sister and younger brother, who were 8 and 6 respectively, they knew, and they went to the funeral, but not me. How this came to happen. I last saw my grandfather over Father's Day weekend, and so that was June, about the same time we're in now. And then July came, and my parents sent me off to computer camp. And while I was gone, he died, and they had the funeral. And it wasn't like I was off in the remote mountains camping. I was at a university, but nobody thought to tell me. So that was in July. And then August came, and September, school started. October, we had Halloween. November came. And one evening at dinner, I said, so, are we going to go visit Grandpa over Thanksgiving? And there was dead silence at the table. And my parents sat me down after dinner and told me, oh, well, Grandpa died back in July when you were gone. And I looked around, and nobody else was crying because Grandpa just died. And so I didn't. My name is Allison Greathouse, and I'm actually autistic. Today we're going to talk about advocating beyond your comfort zone, the intersection of advocacy, acceptance, autonomy, and autism. I have my master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. I'm a certified rehabilitation counselor, and my job in the state of Nevada is helping people with disabilities to get and keep jobs. So when you see the Actually Autistic hashtag, it has the connotation of saying, I have the lived experience of an autistic individual, and that experience is valid. Person first versus identity first terminology. I have worked in the disability services field for over 25 years. And so I will probably continue to say person with autism sometimes, although I'm trying to teach myself to say autistic person instead, showing deference to identity first terminology, because yes, autism is not something that I can go, this just does not go with those shoes today. I'm leaving this at home. That does not happen. So when we talk about advocating beyond your comfort zone, talking about self-advocacy, it's the ability to articulate one's needs and make informed decisions about the support necessary to meet those needs. We also talk about autism as being a spectrum. So at one end, you could be a little quirky, and then in the middle, definitely autistic, and then at the end, there's tragic autistic. That's really not how it goes, because we are not two-dimensional. Now, if you had to, I don't even know if you could say score, if you had to score my family on the autism spectrum, yes, I am a little quirky. Okay, I'm a lot quirky. My older daughter is definitely autistic. And if you had to categorize her as such, my younger daughter could be called tragically autistic. She also has cerebral palsy. She is profoundly deaf, and she has one vocal word, Mom. But that's really not how a spectrum works. So we have to look at pragmatic language, social awareness, monotropic mindset, information processing, sensory processing, repetitive behaviors, neuromotor differences. I actually like this representation better, because if you have met one autist, then you have met one autist. So I'm most like hypothetical person A. I have more sensitivities than that person, so my blue should be a little bit bigger. That's part of why I wear the bright purple glasses. It really helps on the computer. It also helps with the overhead fluorescent lights. It doesn't help with the buzzing of the overhead fluorescent lights, but it definitely helps with my sensory processing issues. So I often talk about my life as a Pinterest fail. So when you see a Pinterest fail, you have the professionally done, the person had all of the right tools and the little sugar discs to make the eyes for Cookie Monster, and aren't those adorable? The second picture, if you look at it, I would serve those cupcakes at a child's birthday party. I do see where the maker went wrong on a few things. You can tell that the cupcakes were not cooled before the frosting was put on, because the frosting itself is kind of melting. Well, and also they used yellow cake instead of chocolate cake, and that was just wrong. But at a child's birthday party, they're just going to eat them and enjoy them. This to me is a representation of how I have spent my life trying to match what the people around me were doing, and sometimes I fail spectacularly. The first time I can remember doing this, I was 3 years old, and I was at the park with my family. It was in the morning, and it was summertime, so I had my little sandals on, and we were walking through the grass, and the grass was wet. And a piece of grass was stuck to my foot, and I started crying because I didn't like the way it felt. And at 3 years old, I was many, many years away from learning about sensory integration and how some things are just not going to feel right to me, and how I need to avoid those things, or at least prepare myself for those things about to happen. So I was standing there in the grass crying because there was a piece of grass stuck to my foot, and my dad starts yelling at me, "Look around! No one else is crying because a piece of grass touched their foot." So I looked around, and indeed, nobody else was crying because a piece of grass touched their foot. Strictly speaking, I wasn't crying because a piece of grass touched my foot. It was stuck there, and I knew if I picked it off with my hand, it was going to get on my hand, and then my hand would be slimy, and it would just be awful. But of course, at 3, I did not have the communication skills to say this. So I learned to just not cry when I found things upsetting. So it shouldn't surprise you that by the time I was 10, and I'm being told that my grandfather just died, or that he died several months ago and nobody bothered to tell me, when I looked around and nobody else was crying, I didn't. Weird thing, my dad actually said to me, "Well, you didn't say anything at the time." And that to me is part of the dilemma that the autist faces, is that we aren't given the option to give our opinion. So what I want to know as an autistic person is, where do you learn the secret handshake? How do you know when it's okay to break the rules? How do you know what the rules are? And most importantly, how do I become an accepted rule breaker? This has happened to me again and again and again in my life. One time in my career, I was at a training, and it was one of those kind of long and boring trainings, and there were peanuts at the table, and one of my coworkers was having fun throwing peanuts at other people in the meeting. And so I decided this is a lighthearted and fun meeting. And so the presenter said something, and I made a pun, and my supervisor looks at me and goes, "Allison, not now." And I was like, okay. So I did not do it again. And later, as I'm being written up for this horrible pun that I made, I said, but Chris was throwing peanuts at people. And my supervisor goes, we're not here to talk about Chris. We're here to talk about you. And so it was like being in the principal's office or sitting with one of my teachers in grade school. We're not here to talk about what the other student was doing. We're here to talk about you. So how do I become an accepted rule breaker? Is it just because I'm weird? Is it because I'm less liked? Is it because I'm quirky? Is it because I'm not the teacher's pet? Not mom's favorite? I have gone through life thinking that the next setting is going to be different. Maybe in high school. No, not in high school. College? Absolutely not. In the workplace? Really, it depends on the supervisor I have. So one of the things I've been learning to do is to accept myself as I am, and hint, you are not broken. The Maori word for autism is takiwatanga, and it means in their own time and space. Many languages indigenous to the Americas do not have a word that means the English concept of disability. Instead, the phrase finds his place is used. In many cultures, developmental disabilities, at least the symptoms of developmental disabilities, they are viewed as holy. In Hmong, for example, they don't have a word that means epilepsy. Instead, they say the spirit catches you and you fall down. And so they see a person convulsing on the floor and they go, oh, yes, that person is communing with a spirit. And oh, by the way, that is somebody whose advice I should seek later. This slide was created by another mother of autistic children. She says, my head is not in the sand. I am not in denial. I am not lying. It is possible to raise an autistic child without feeling burdened, sad, angry, depressed, and inconvenienced. Unconditional love, acceptance, optimism, unwavering support, strength, positivity. These are my truths. It's that simple. So don't tell me that I can't. So that brings me to my beautiful children. They are currently 16 years old. I wanted to be able to share them, but at the same time, I wanted to honor their privacy as teenagers. And so I said, well, what if I use these pictures? Because they do prove an interesting point. They're twins, but they have very different sensory needs. So Alexandria is on the left. And when she was 3 years old, they had picture day for early intervention program. And so she walked right up to that bar, placed her hands on it, looked up at the camera and smiled. Cassia, on the other hand, on the right, I set her down behind the bar and she's holding on to it and she's crying. And I look at the photographer looks at me. And at that moment, at age 3, I could have told her, look around, nobody else is crying, it's picture day, you're supposed to be smiling. I did not do that. Instead, I picked her up and I put her over my shoulder. And that is actually the back of my head that you can see in that picture, as well as the back of my shoulder. I was smart enough to wear a blouse that day that matched the background that the photographer was using. And so we have this beautiful picture of Cassia with a sweet smile on her face for her first school picture. So they have very different sensory needs, and I had my own ideas on how to raise them. I wanted their insides to matter. I wanted them to feel right and to try to take care of whatever was wrong. And sometimes it's just hard to figure it out, especially when there are communication issues. but we do our best. In this case, what she wanted was to be picked up, and I was able to meet that need. So these are my kids living a happy life. This is what it looks like when we encourage stimming. Our living room is more of a motor room. Spinning, flapping, swinging, jumping, and especially playing are encouraged. As parents, we want to give our children what we didn't have, and I gave my children acceptance. They were diagnosed with autism at ages 11 and 14. So Cassia was diagnosed first, and when we got to that IEP meeting where we were going over our triennial testing, they had a box of Kleenex sitting there on the table. And when you walk into an IEP meeting and there is a box of Kleenex sitting on the table, that they're probably going to tell you something that you didn't necessarily want to hear. But in our case, they go, okay, Cassia has autism. I go, that makes so much sense. That connects all of these dots. I had even purchased books on autism to learn more about the sensory integration issues that she had, because that was where most of the information could be found. So then 3 years later, the next round of triennial testing, I said, you know what? Alexandria has some similar characteristics to Cassia and might not all be twin behavior. So I said, let's have her tested. And I could tell that the teacher on the other end of the phone was relieved that I broached the subject, because she was going to ask permission. Hey, can we test her for this? So we did. And at that IEP meeting, okay, first off, they did not give me a box of Kleenex. Second, the teachers throughout the meeting, they were saying, Alexandria does this, and she does that, and she does this. And each example they gave, I said, well, yeah, but she comes by that quite rightly because I do it. Oh, yeah, she totally learned that from me. That's a learned behavior. And at the end of this meeting, the school psychologist looks right at her and says, do you want to have autism? And she's like, no. And he said, well, you do, and I'm going to help you with that. And I was like, wait, what? She can't have autism. She's just like me. So at that point, I started doing research about how autism presents in women and how autism presents in adults who have been masking their whole lives, having gone undiagnosed. And the story that I just presented is very, very common, where a teacher is telling you your child has these autistic traits and lists them off. And mom goes, well, I do that, I do that, I do that, I do that. And so I started looking at, could I have autism? And it should not surprise you, I have a little bit of anxiety. Okay, I have a lot of anxiety. So I see a therapist regularly, and I would go to him and I would say, I think I have autism. He'd go, you don't have autism. And every so often I would say, no, really, I think I have autism. And then he would say, no, it's better explained by this and this, and you don't meet the diagnostic criteria, and da, da, da. And finally one day I said, okay, I need you to listen to me. I need you to listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. I think I have autism. And he goes, why on earth would you want to have autism? Excuse me. Water break. Much better, thank you. So I said, it's not that I want to have autism necessarily. It's that I really think I do. And so at that point, I decided, okay, we need to put this to bed. I have it or I don't. And so that Saturday, I sat down and I wrote a 14-page paper in APA format, and I titled it A Case Study on Quirkiness, Why I Have Autism. And so I went through the 5 diagnostic criteria of the DSM-5. I used the information from the Job Accommodation Network, which is something I fall back on often at work. I used a learning disability assessment that I had done while I was in grad school, a vocational assessment that I had done while I was in grad school, and the unofficial checklist of how women present with autism by The Art of Autism. That is an interesting page to look up if you don't already follow it. And I presented it to my therapist as if I were presenting my thesis. And he goes, okay, you've convinced me. You got your diagnosis. Now what? So many people who are seeking a diagnosis have a hard time getting it. And so many people have asked me if I could share this with them. I put it up on Tumblr, taking out any self-identifying information. And I put it under Queen O Quirk, which is one word. So if you need help finding that, let me know. If you find the picture of me spinning in front of the castle, you have found the right place. So for Criterion E, Criterion E is usually used in the case of somebody who has an intellectual disability. So if, for example, you have an IQ of 62 and you're functioning on par with another person with an IQ of 62, then no, those things are not a sign of autism. I kind of flipped that around in my paper because I am literally a genius. I am a member of Mensa International, American Mensa, Northern Nevada Mensa, and I actually serve as the Gifted Youth Coordinator as well as the Young Adult Mensa Coordinator for all of Northern Nevada. And I don't function anywhere near as well as I think I should for somebody as smart as I am. I often say that I'm a really stupid smart person, which is a lot nicer than other things I've been called. All throughout school, my teachers would say, okay, we have to test this child because there is something wrong with you. And it would always come back that I was gifted. But nobody could figure out why I couldn't get my homework done, why I couldn't turn it in. And my 6th grade teacher actually called me, and please forgive the antiquated terminology, but she routinely called me her retarded genius. So yeah, that word kind of hurts me too. And so whenever I say, let's end the R word, I support that fully. I am also a very strong proponent of neurodiversity. Autists are complete human beings. We are not pieces. We are not puzzling. We are not incomprehensible. We are not incomplete. We are unique individuals with unique needs. We also have our special interests. I don't particularly like that term. I prefer to say that I'm passionate about things. I'm passionate about movies and literature. If somebody took the time to write and publish a book or to put a film into production, I figured that that is something that other people can relate to. This is one of many examples of me looking around and seeing what other people are doing. So in the early 90s, the movie The Last of the Mohicans came out. And I saw it many times because of this one line. The leading man says to the leading lady, "My father warned me about people like you. He said, do not try to understand them, and do not try to make them understand you. That is because they are a breed apart, and make no sense. And if that did not describe the majority of society in my eyes, I didn't know what else did. And I thought, somewhere out there is my tribe, and I just need to find them. So I encourage all of you, find your tribe, find where you fit in. In other words, I'm autistic, which means that everyone around me has a disorder that makes them say things they don't mean, not care about structure, fail to hyperfocus on singular important topics, have unreliable memories, drop weird hints, and creepily stare into my eyeballs. So why do people say you're the weird one? Because there's more of them than me. I love that on Scenic View Academy's website, they have this video about NTS, neurotypical syndrome, which afflicts 58 out of 59 people in society. And they basically describe this, this slide. The backside of that, though, is that many of the darkest chapters of human history are written with the plot line of the group that is in the majority, or at least the group that is in control, trying to destroy another group simply because they find their existence to be problematic. All you have to do is look at the news and look at the Black Lives Matter protests that we have going on to know that something is wrong, and it's been wrong for far too long. Imagine what it would look like if society took up the issue that autistic children should not be abused by those paid to serve them. Does your child line up their toys? This means your child may have challenges expanding their play skills. To develop their play, switch up their playing style by interrupting their routine. Lining up toys is a classic characteristic of autism spectrum disorder. Engage in pretend play by creating different scenarios. And lastly, to prevent your child from lining up their toys, place them in a bin, bucket, drawer, etc. The goal is to interrupt this behavior to prevent it from occurring. Okay, this is cruel. It does not hurt anyone when the child plays by lining things up. As a matter of fact, doing so is his or her way of bringing order to a chaotic world. And oh, by the way, guess who's creating all of the chaos? Probably the person with the bin, bucket, drawer, etc. This lovely human being is one of the founders of applied behavioral analysis. He said, you see, you start pretty much from scratch when you work with an autistic child. You have a person in the physical sense. They have hair, a nose, a mouth, but they are not people in the psychological sense. One way to look at the job of helping autistic kids is to see it a matter of constructing a person. You have the raw materials, but you have to build the person. This gentleman also created gay conversion therapy. Both therapies are, let's not call them therapies. Both practices are cruel. They also tell the person what you feel on the inside does not matter at all. And so you're supposed to try to conform with what society wants to see from you. If you view people as less than human, it is okay to do unethical things to them. ABA is an attempt to put a human being into a state of learned helplessness. The behavior is the symptom experienced by the neurotypical person. Beneath every behavior, there is a feeling, and beneath each feeling is a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. The meltdown only happens after a continued state of distress. So when my daughter was standing there and crying, when I was trying to get her to smile to have her picture taken, I could have told her to look around, everybody else is smiling, or I could choose to meet the need. And I'm grateful that I chose the latter. The goal of ABA is behavioral compliance, and the autist's feelings are inconsequential. Learned helplessness is the giving up reaction, the quitting response that follows from the belief that whatever you do doesn't matter. Look around. Nobody else is crying because a piece of grass touched their foot. I liken it to holding a lit candle and saying, okay, you need to put your hand there, you need to not move, and you need to not scream. That really should never, ever, ever happen unless somebody is wise enough to go, there you go. And encouraging somebody to stim at a time when it's all right to do so is something that really should happen with autistic children. Meltdowns and bolting are a natural manifestation of unrelenting distress. It's like the candle in the hand. If that candle is lit, yes, the child is going to start crying and screaming and kicking, or they might just run away. It's my belief that our perceptions of autism are so deeply informed by autistic trauma that to many people, a reduction in symptoms of autism is simply what happens when you reduce distress in an autistic individual. Exposure therapy is the attempt to stop the reaction to the stimulus without addressing the root cause. We are human like everyone else. Autistic people are not broken neurotypicals. That right there, that is why I want to have autism, because I'm not broken. My behaviors, my quirks, my sensitivities, they are within normal parameters. There are actually no diagnostic criteria for the term high functioning. It's only the measure of degree to which the neurotypical person experiences a person's autism. And so oftentimes, if I tell somebody, I have autism, they go, oh, you don't act autistic. I'm like, yeah, well, you should see what's going on the inside. I love Shel Silverstein. This illustrates this concept so beautifully. He had blue skin and so, she had blue skin and so did he. He kept it hidden, so did she. They searched for blue their whole life through, then passed right by and never knew. This is what masking is like. And one of the things that I do, I work as a counselor. That is my profession. And so my clients, in order to feel unconditional positive regard from me, I need to make eye contact with them. And so 15 minutes before I meet with a client, I close my office door, I turn off all the lights, and I do my flapping and my spinning and my chewing. And during my sessions, I actually have a piece of gum. And it helps me feel normal. So if you look at those masks, that is what it feels like. And at the end of the day, taking that mask off is wonderful because there is a high price to be paid. Just because someone carries it well doesn't mean it isn't heavy. Part of doing things differently for me is allowing myself to stim, is allowing myself that time to make myself feel normal before I have to do something that puts a strain on my system. So what we need is to have a paradigm shift. Autistic people have the right to exist, to be our authentic selves, we have the right to be heard and our experience validated. And I'm going to read that again. Autistic people have the right to exist, to be our authentic selves. We have the right to be heard and our experience validated. The first time I gave this presentation, a gentleman came up to me afterward and he was shaking my hand and he was saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And he goes, "Nobody has ever told me this before." And all throughout the rest of the conference, whenever I saw him, he goes, "Thank you, thank you." This is the basis of self-advocacy. This is the basis of autonomy. So you have my permission to do what you need to do. Autistic women tend to have unique hair colors. I refer to mine as mermaid. Be like Rudolph. Your difference is your superpower. Be like Dumbo. Play to your strengths. It would be so sad if this fabulous creature spent most of the day, every day, coloring all of those spots, either orange or black. So it's a fact. I don't understand why or how people can attack the concept of neurodiversity. For one thing, it's a biological and scientific fact, so it's a bit like attacking the concept of gravity. Neurodiversity is part of diversity. If you are lucky enough to be different, don't ever change. That's wisdom from Taylor Swift. Do what makes your autistic heart happy. Autism is not an illness, it's a different way of being human, and all we want is to be human. We don't conform to what others may say is normal, so stim on. Stimming helps to self-regulate. If it's not harming anyone, what is your beef? Failure to follow the desire to stim is a form of self-harm, which often leads to other acts of self-harm in an attempt to regulate. I sucked my thumb until I was 8 or 9 years old, and my parents were finally able to shame me out of it. What that led to, though, was I would chew the insides of my cheeks, and so I would always have open sores on the insides of my mouth. My molars, when I was a teen, my dentist said, "These teeth have to last you the rest of your life. You don't get other ones." Because he could see as a teen that I was grinding down my molars. And so I have my chewy gems and I have my gum. And I use my delay tactics when I know I'm walking into a situation where I might not be able to stim. It might not be okay for me to stand up and just start flapping away. I try to always have acceptable stems on hand. Sometimes I will just start signing. American Sign Language was my foreign language in college. And so it's beautiful because if you're practicing for your sign class, then flap away. The struggle is real. Being autistic, I've always found it difficult to read other people. People see this as my fault for not having an expected life skill. At the same time, other people find it difficult to read me. This is also seen as my fault for not communicating more clearly. The sad truth is, if you're autistic, a lot of things are unfairly seen as your fault. Not realizing what you did was wrong until after you've done it, if at all. I often apologize, just unequivocally, I am sorry, without knowing what I did wrong. The difficulty, though, is I don't know how to not do it again. Do what makes you feel right. So what does stimming look like? It could look like flapping. It could look like doodling. I know a lot of neurotypical people who doodle because it helps them to engage their brain in another way so that they can focus and listen. Echolalia, a lot of times people think I'm mocking them. I also have a vocal tic. You have probably noticed it. Twisting hair, swinging, rocking, fidgeting. Do what makes you feel right. Find your own way of being yourself and walk your own walk. This is a message to parents by Jim Sinclair. It was actually given at the 1993 International Autism Conference, and he was addressing the concept, and I've seen this in autism parent groups, and it's kind of heartbreaking. And it's the notion that your child died and you lost that child to autism. And he said, you didn't lose a child to autism. You lost a child because the child you waited for never came into existence. That isn't the fault of the autistic child, who does exist, and it shouldn't be our burden. We need and deserve families who can see us and value us for ourselves, not families whose vision of us is obscured by the ghosts of children who never lived. Grieve if you must, but for your own lost dreams, but don't mourn for us. We are alive, we are real, and we are here waiting for you. Accept me as I am. I'm a person to be loved and not a problem to be solved, because autists are people too. Awareness versus acceptance. So people who are aware, they tend to use the puzzle piece and they talk about suffering and there needs to be a cure and deficits and it's an epidemic, versus acceptance, inclusion, strengths, respect, accommodations, community, support. This is actually why I'm here. I attended a professional conference where there was an autism expert, who we get to call doctor, who was dismissive of the notion that an autistic adult might just have something intelligent to say about how autistic children should be raised. If she's out there giving presentations, I need to be out there giving presentations. So I advocate for acceptance because we are different, we are not less. So tell a friend. Acceptance is active. Ask questions, understand, tell a friend, include, show your support, make a difference. In 1990, I started learning American Sign Language, so I had my ASL 101 class. And I saw a video of news clips from the Gallaudet protest in 1988. And that was where the campus was shut down because yet another hearing person had been selected to be the next president of Gallaudet University. And I remember watching that footage and going, you know, that college, it was founded back when Abraham Lincoln was president. So yes, late 1980s, it is time for a deaf president. Part of the protest, they borrowed a banner from the Civil Rights Museum, and it was a street-wide banner, and the students carried it as they marched on the Capitol, and it says, "We still have a dream." Now, when I see those same video clips, they literally bring tears to my eyes because what those students did, they showed the world that deaf people can do anything except for hear. So, acceptance is the key to success. Until we create a nation that regularly wants to employ a person with autism, assure for a quality education for each person with autism, and eliminates the far too many unnecessary obstacles placed in the way of success for a person with autism, we really won't be as successful as we must. We have a unique perspective which makes us valuable. The world needs autistic people. Embracing myself as autistic took me from feeling like a failed neurotypical person to feeling like somebody who had found a way to survive and even thrive against significant, unrecognized challenges. The impact of that was huge for my self-esteem. It is the greatest gift. So celebrate yourself. How are you helping others on this journey, and how are you progressing yourself? I never thought it was my way of experiencing the world that was at the center of all of my struggles. Knowing this gave me the strength to seek a way to thrive. There are no guides to this unraveling and reweaving because my pattern of my values are my own. To all of you on your own journey, I offer my thoughts in solidarity. We are resilient, and we shall blaze the trail for those who follow. How we approach autism determines how we approach autistic people. So none of the talk about deficits, burdens, tragedies, or disorders. More of the talk about strengths and passions, skills, and unique brilliance. I invite you to join me on this journey. Thank you for your time.